Well, hello there, friends and family. So good to see you again tonight, or maybe not. You can't see me, but you can see this young man here. Maybe he was one of the very first hackers on the computer. Who knows? He looks a little evil, got the evil eye, as you can see. And he's got a little Commodore 16 in front of him, hooked to his black and white TV. Yes, he does. But while we stare at him for a minute, let me tell you, everything's good in my neighborhood. Yep, my bank's back online and all appears fine. Yes, it does. We can see our money again. We can check our balance, see what's cleared and what has not. And that's always a good thing. So we're back to feeling fine. But it does make me think now that this has all transpired, that maybe I've learned something about all of this. That it's not good to keep all your eggs, whether you have a few or a lot, in the same bucket. So I'm going to be looking into that. Maybe it's time to diversify. But yep, I'm happy. Everything's right in my neighborhood. So what's this video about? And why are we putting the eye on this young man as he sits in his paneled den in front of his 13-inch black and white TV? Yeah, we're going to be going through just the way it was back in the 70s and maybe the 80s, even the 60s too, and therefore even further back, of just how life was when we were all growing up. And I do believe it was safer back then. Things weren't as exciting, but there was always times of anticipation and waiting. So let's get on in with it. As you can see, this young man here seems so happy, but he's got the evil eye as he types away on his Commodore 16. And I had the same very keyboard computer. And when you say 16, that was 16 megabytes of memory. Yep, not much in today's standard. Not gigabytes, children, megabytes. That's 1,000 bytes. Yep, not a million or a billion. I'm not sure what gigabytes are. I can't remember right off the top of my head. But I know it's more than 1,000 bytes. So this is all we had. And you had to write your own programs so you could do things on the computer and see them on your TV. Life was good. And this was one of the first ones, not the only first, of personal computers that was released to the public. And I owned one. Let me know in the comments below the video if you had one too. Oh boy. And oh joy, don't we all remember this? The anticipation of Saturday morning cartoons. Yeah, this was way before cable TV and way before the Cartoon Network. And of course the internet, where you can now stream all kinds of cartoon shows 24/7 all you want. All we had was Saturday morning. And when the TV stations came on, I think at 6 a.m., and we'd have cartoons up to noon. And once it was done, then they went away. Oh yeah, that was all there was. And just like it says, yeah, in the time before demand media, the week-long wait for Saturday morning cartoon was filled with anticipation, and we really did. We waited for that Saturday morning. Children across the neighborhood would wake up early, pour a bowl of sugary cereal, plant themselves in front of the television for hours of animated adventures. Yes, we would. Yep, those days are gone. Now, yep, we can see cartoons all day long, and nighttime too. Yep, this is one of the first things I can remember ever having that my parents got me for Christmas. A cassette tape player. Yeah, you might remember the Sony Walkmans. Oh joy, I had one of them. The first Sony Walkman was just an AM/FM radio. And then they came out with one that had AM/FM and cassette too. But yep, we had our cassettes. But what we would do is we would wait till one of our favorite shows or songs would come on, and we would hit click and record it too. And this way we could listen to it anytime we wanted to. It was a way of saving money. And it was way before MP3, CDs, DVDs, and all the streaming we got now. Yep, for music lovers, creating the perfect mixtape was a heartfelt gesture and a show of one's taste and dedication. It involved hovering over the stereo for hours, and I remember that, waiting to hit record for the next chart-topping hit or a dedicated love song. Yep, things were great. And then you had your tape, and you'd play it till it got wore out. And who doesn't remember back when we all played outdoors? Mom would send us out and tell us to stay close to the house or in the neighborhood. But there was one golden rule. I think you all remember it. I know I do. Playing outside until dusk. Before screens dominated our lives, children would play outside for hours, only returning home when the street lights came on. And I can remember my mother and my father telling me many and many a time, boy, you better make sure you're back at the house by the time the street lights come on. And here again, this is before the internet, when all we had was the mail and the thrill of the snail mail, as it's now called. Receiving handwritten letters or postcards in the mail was an exciting event, filled with anticipation and personal touches. Yeah, we used to wait for the cards and letters from grandma, uncles and aunts, and other friends and family. Yes, we did, along with so much more. Woo, and who don't remember, before Google, DuckDuckGo, and what have you, the Encyclopedia of Britannica. If I remember correctly, there was also the Encyclopedia of Knowledge too, and World Book. Now my parents bought all of us kids a set of Britannicas, and we get an assignment for homework from school where you had to look it up. You had two choices. If you had encyclopedias at home, you could head on home and do your research in the Britannica and find out all about the subject you were supposed to write about that night. If you didn't, you had to stop into the school library and sit there and do your research before going home. And this was long before Google. This is where the kids went. Encyclopedia was the go-to source for information, researching a topic, meant flipping through volumes of books. And how many of us didn't get caught the very first time copying it down word for word and having the teacher give us a lesson about plagiarism? Yep, you just couldn't copy it and put it on your paper. You had to be creative and write about it yourself. Now we all have cell phones. Everybody does. Or I think everybody does. And of course it's tied to our hip. And we can't live without it. Some people panic when they can't find theirs or leave the house without it. But back in our day, we had the landline. A lot of homes only had one phone and had a special place to put it. In the little phone nook in the hall. Maybe if you were lucky and had a lot of money, you had one hanging on the wall in the kitchen too. And maybe one on one of the living room end tables. But yeah, this is how it was. And there would be times when you would call a number, there wasn't no call waiting or call forwarding, and you get that there beep, 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 beep buzzing of a busy signal because the party you were calling was on the phone. I can remember the very first time my parents got a phone. Of course, phone lines were expensive back then. And it was a party line. And you may not remember or know what that is. But that was where when multiple families shared a line to keep the costs down. And if you were lucky, you'd only have 2 or 3 on the same line. If you weren't, it might be 4 to 6 or 8. And you'd have to go on every time you wanted to use it. There'd be somebody talking on the line. Of course, it was considered impolite to listen in, but hey, some people did. And they tried to be sneaky about it. Yes, they did. It was their way of being entertained, I guess. But you'd have to ask politely, hey, I have an emergency call. Could you get off the line? Of course, that's when they'd listen in to see if you told the truth or if you just lied. Did you ever have a party line? And for most of us, we started out being taught how to read maps. Yep, they came on paper. We had our atlases. And remember those maps that you could pick up for free in all the gas stations? Yeah, I love those. I still have some here, though I don't know why. And our parents would teach us how to read a map and use it, of course, then in school too. I wonder if they do any of that now. Of course, now we got Google Maps. There's GPS on our phones, and now even in our cars that everybody depends on. But do you still keep a road atlas on hand for when the internet goes down? And who doesn't remember their very first camera and what a thrill it was to be able to capture an image and save it for the rest of your life? Not like now where they're all on our phone, which eventually, if the phone ever dies, they all disappear and go somewhere where pictures go when the phones all die. Of course, we'd take our pictures and then we'd take them to our parents, and we'd have to take them to the drugstore or photo shop and have the film developed, which could take another 2-3 days to a week. And of course, later on they came up with 1-day processing. You remember that by Kodak? Woo! Now that really speeded things up. Of course, you had to pay more. The cheaper it got if you were willing to wait. But if you wanted 1 day, you were going to have to pay. I love taking pictures on film. But sadly, now, since cameras are mostly digital, even I have had to make the switch. I don't even think there's a place in my town to get film developed anymore. Let me know if there's still a place like your drugstore that develops film. And this one takes me back and also tells you my age. Yep, I can remember the first time I paid for and subscribed to the internet. And no, it wasn't high speed, it wasn't cable or Wi-Fi. It was through the phone lines, dial-up internet sounds. Were something you heard every time you dial the number for the internet, place your phone in a cradle, and you'd hear that. That's sort of kind of the way it was. But if you've ever heard it, I'm sure you can find it on the internet and play it to remember. That was the most joyful sound that filled you with anticipation, because now you were going to join the internet and be one of the internet generation. Oh, I remember it so well, the screeching sound of the dial-up modem connecting to the internet. Yeah, if you've ever heard it or can remember it, it's unforgettable. And often meant no phone calls until you were done browsing, and that was true. You couldn't be on your modem and the internet and receive a call. So that was sort of something that was sort of hassle, unless you paid for 2 lines. And few did that. And this one sort of makes me giggle. And I remember it from grade school, junior high, high school too. And that's passing notes to your buddies and that special someone. Maybe it was your girlfriend, or one you wanted to be. And you tried to do it real slick. You know, you tried to scoot it on over there when the teacher wasn't looking. Pass it to a friend that would pass it to someone else, and they'd pass it back. Sometimes there was a but that when you passed it to him or her, they'd turn you in and take it to the teacher, which, depending on your teacher, would either throw it in the trash can beside her desk, or if she wanted to make an example and embarrass you, like happened to me a time or two, she'd unfold it and read it out to the class and ask me, Tommy, you don't need to be doing this. But then I had one teacher. She was as strict as could be, Mrs. Thomas. And this was in junior high school. Oh, I think it was in the 8th grade. And she found me passing notes. And of course, she came down and snatched it away. Of course, she made me come up to the front of the class and also stick out my hand. And she got that ruler. You remember that? And she took that ruler and whacked the palm of my hand a couple of times. And I'll tell you straight up, it stung. And she said, I hope this lets you know what's going to happen if you pass notes anymore. Which I often said, yes, ma'am. Did you ever pass notes in school to your buddies, your girlfriends, sisters and family too? I won't lie, I did. That's all we had. Before everybody had a phone. Now all they do is text each other back and forth when the teachers got their back to them. But I think this was rather more personal and showed more love. What's your thoughts on it? Now you can tell this guy's full of excitement. He's got his remote. He's crashed on the couch. Yep. He's looking through the TV Guide channel. But the TV Guide channel on TV came way after what we all used to wait for. And I know in the 50s and 60s, and even beyond, I don't know when it ended, and that was the paper-printed TV Guide. Remember that? Came out every week. And you'd wait for it in anticipation to see what was coming up on next week's TV shows. Now, you could either buy a subscription and get it in the mail, or you could pick it up at about any checkout counter in America. It'd be right there. For the longest time, that's where my mother got it. She loved the TV Guide, so she could keep up with her soaps. But finally, she bit the bullet and got a subscription. She waited for it too. And as soon as that thing came in the mail, she was going to spend some time that evening checking out what was coming up in the next week TV shows. Did you get a TV Guide? Well, I got one too. But sadly, it's gone. And who doesn't remember renting movies at the video stores? This too was something we loved doing and waited in anticipation. I can remember the kids. I would get off work, drive on home, and the kids would ask, are we renting a movie tonight? Or maybe tomorrow too? I'd think about it a while and I said, well, why not? It didn't cost much unless you were getting a new release. You could rent a movie for $1.99 or even 99 cents or less. Well, like I say, unless it was a new release, then it might be anywhere from $3.99 and up. But yeah, we do the fast food Fridays from time to time, and we also run by our local Blockbuster and rent a video for that night too. And maybe if the kids were good, got their chores all done, the garden work done, and yard work too, I'd make a special run and let them pick out one for Saturday night too. Yep, Friday nights often meant visiting the local video rental store. And you could spend an hour or more in here browsing through every aisle to see what they had and what you hadn't watched before. And this is something I fondly remember, and I still get one. And that's a phone book. Within that phone book, they had all the businesses, people, your doctors, your dentists, contractors, and what have you. You just open it up, browse through the pages, and find what you want, and give them a call up. Yep, I still get them, though it's really shrank and is very small. And then there was the pay phones and the phone booths all over America. They used to be everywhere. If it wasn't a phone booth, there'd be a pay phone in the grocery stores, the gas stations, the barber shops, the beauty shops, everywhere. And then there'd be phone booths outside, on the street corners, and the sidewalks, and parking lots. Yeah, there had to be a place for Superman to dart inside and change into his Superman clothes. I wonder what he'd do now. There's no way he could jump in a cell phone and change and make his way out. But yeah, there was a time, of course that was all when Ma Bell reigned supreme, we had one of the premier phone networks in the world. And it would even work when the power went off, unlike our cell phones do today. It was very reliable. Of course, a storm could come through and bring the lines down. But as we've learned today, the storms can come through, take the power lines down, the towers go down, and your cell phone doesn't work either. So, we haven't really gained. And I think this last incident with AT&T and all the other cell phone companies proves. Now, cell phones, they can be hacked and be shut down for all day. Well, you couldn't do that with old Ma Bell's landlines, payphones, or phone booths. And this was another one too. It's actually twofold. What they're talking about here is the mystery of blind dates. And oh yeah, during high school, I went on a few of them too, recommended by my friends or other people I knew in school. Didn't know the girl, hadn't seen her, maybe she was from another school. And sometimes it turned out just right. And sometimes not. We weren't quite incompatible. Didn't have like interests or what have you. But I would make the best of the night. I'd get through. I wouldn't complain. But yep, blind dates were really blind. You never knew what you were getting into. And in a way, that made them fun. But then, later on, once you got going steady, y'all remember that, going steady? Yep, maybe you'd give a steady pin or a ring, and then you'd plan date night, which if I remember correctly, was on Friday or Saturday night. I can't remember which, but there was one of the 2 days that was the right one. One was date night, and then the other one, you hung out with your buddies and what have you, and friends, maybe at the mall or at the dairy dip, which we all did at Shoney's. But you'd have your date night. You'd make your plans throughout the week, what you were going to do, where you were going to go, where you were going to eat. And I can remember doing this with the wife. We'd plan our date night. Not maybe every week, but at least a week or 2 during the month. And we waited for that in anticipation. Maybe it was dinner and a movie. Yep. Or we'd go someplace special. But a lot of times it was just getting out, having a babysitter for the kids, eating dinner, enjoying some alone time, and sharing each other. Did you ever plan and have date nights with your significant other? And what you're seeing right here is something that used to be on almost every desk. The Rolodex. What was this all about? This is where you wrote the names of all the company contacts, their phone numbers and addresses. Yeah, your friends, your families, addresses, and contact information too. In fact, I still have one of these packed up somewhere in the dang closet, I'm sure. Do you still have one? Do you even use it? Yeah. And then another thing we did, we memorized phone numbers. And I know that's something we all don't do anymore. I mean, I keep important numbers written down in my wallet because I don't remember them. We all are so dependent on our cell phones, and we don't even look up the number in it. We just press whatever contact name we've got under. You know, sometimes it's a pet name, like, you know, Bunny, Honey, Loved One, or what have you. Yeah. I don't know my kids' numbers right off the top of my head anymore, or all the other numbers that are important to me. But back in the day, somehow we did. So let me know in the comments below the video. Do you still have a Rolodex? Or maybe you use an address book to write all your numbers and contact information down. Or some of you that are probably smarter than me can still memorize them. I can't. I'll just be outright honest. And yes, there was a time when we had a lot fewer entertainment choices, didn't we? And I think in a way, those being limited freed up a lot of time to concentrate on other things. Things we needed to be doing around the house and with others, friends and family. Now we're bombarded from all sides. We've got the internet, all kinds of streaming, our phones. Yeah, you can spend all day tied up watching all kinds of things. We got YouTube, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, just to name a few, and there's Pluto and Tubi, and I don't know them all. But you can definitely fill up every minute of your day and never talk to another person or go outside and do a thing. And I think in many ways that's a problem. But back in our day, we only had a few TV channels. We didn't have any streaming. You know, we might have been able to go get a DVD, but you weren't going to hardly ever rent enough to go for several hours, and you weren't going to get enough to go all day. I can remember back in the day, we had black and white TVs. Well, yeah, in the living room there was the 19-inch with 2 channel knobs. The top one was VHF, 13 channels. The bottom one was UHF. I can't remember how many channels was on it, but it was quite a few. And that's what you had, but not every number on the dial was broadcasting a TV station. We were lucky, depending on where you lived. If you weren't living in a big city, like we never were, you might have 2 or 3 stations, maybe 4. Growing up here in Alabama, the most we ever had was 3 or 4. And you remember all of them, the networks: ABC, CBS, NBC. And if you were close enough to the broadcasting towers, you might be able to pick up PBS. And that's what we had. It came on at 6 o'clock in the morning and went off at midnight, where it always showed the waving flag and played the national anthem before ending the broadcast for the day. And that was it. And who can't remember? All of us can. The sound of a typewriter, that clickety click click, clickety click click click. Yep. Or learning to type in school. Ooh, did I hate typing class in high school? Because I was never really good, and I struggled to pass. If I remember correctly, you had to be able to type 60 words a minute to pass. And I tried, and I tried, and I just couldn't pass the test. Well, my teacher worked with me, and eventually one time I got fast enough, and thankfully she was kind, and she said, well, you did it once, you've passed. Let me know if you remember the sounds of the typewriter clicking away and how fast you could type. I know some could type twice that or more. But for me, I always struggled. Now, what we do is we get on our screens and with our thumbs, and we just pick and choose. Yep, it was faster back then with a typewriter, if you knew how to type. Far faster than printing or even cursive writing. That's what it was all about. Waiting for the news. Oh yeah. The news wasn't bombarding us every millisecond of every hour of every day. Nope, it wasn't coming at us from all angles like it is nowadays on the internet. Mainstream media, social media. I mean, it almost drives you insane. But back in our day, all we had was newspapers and magazines. And your newspapers came out only twice a day at best. And I can remember being told by my father to run out and grab the newspaper off the yard while he was sitting there drinking his coffee. And that's how most Americans would start the day, reading the morning edition of their local newspaper to see what had transpired over the night. That's all we had. And sometimes it would be behind. You didn't know if it actually happened that night, or it could be a day or two before. But we read it in anticipation, and plus, it had the cartoon page. That's all what we kids waited for. And then too, on Sundays, it had the color cartoon section. You remember that? In color. Woo, we love them too. Now, if you were more affluent, you might also get the evening edition. So you'd be ahead of the game. You could see what happened during the day while you were at working, whether it was at home or on the job. And I can remember Daddy doing that too. He'd get in from base, ask me where the paper was. I'd tell him it's on the table by your chair. And he'd say, "That's fine, son." And sometime that night after dinner, in the evening news, he'd sit down and start glancing over the newspaper as we watched a show on TV in the background. Yeah, times were simpler back then. We weren't bombarded by all the craziness we have now. And we look back and think, well, there wasn't as much happening back then. But in all truth, there was probably a lot more happening than we knew. And the only other thing we got, which came in the mail, is the magazines. Like Life, Time, Good Housekeeping, just to name a few. And we'd wait for them, but they were monthly periodicals. So by the time you got a new one, the one you had was rather tattered. I can remember Life, and, the New York, what was it, the New York Post? Let me know. I can't remember them all. But if you can remember some of the others we used to get, of course you had to pay for them too, and they weren't cheap. But let me know some that you remember, and maybe you read. And now we're going to end it right here with something I do truly miss. Something as we were kids and young people, even, through the 80s, was catalogs. And if you were a gardener, you'd wait every late winter for the new gardening catalogs to come out, so you could pore over the colored pages of all the new seeds and start putting your order in. But there was one special catalog. If you were a child, you always waited for eagerly every year. And I'm sure you'll remember what that was. That was the Sears and Roebuck Christmas catalog. Oh, joy. Yes, you know it was true. We'd wait for that to come in the early fall, and we'd all sit around. I mean, almost every day you'd be pouring through the pages, looking at all the new toys and wishing maybe you'd get some. By the time Christmas time came, it would be rather tattered and in shreds. But that didn't mean you threw it away. Oh no, you'd still, even after Christmas, even till the next one came, you would gaze through the pages and dream. Maybe you'd save up your money from chores or other work you did. So the next time your parents went to Sears, you could pick up a new toy for you. Do you remember the Sears and Roebuck catalogs? They had the fall and winter too, spring. Oh yeah, and there wasn't hardly nothing you couldn't find in the bigger Sears and Roebuck catalogs. You know, at one time, you could even buy a house. Yes, you could. In fact, there's at least one house here in my little small town in Towson that was bought through Sears, delivered and built. Maybe one time I'll get permission to show it all to you. But that's where we're going to wrap it all up. It's just a little reminiscing to lighten things up. Let me know in the comments below the video if you enjoyed reminiscing in this type of video as we look back in time, the little slideshow of how life was simpler but more full of wonder, anticipation of what was to come. So hey y'all, until I see you, my friends and family, on the next video and episode of Mr. Tom's Neighborhood, y'all take care. Stay safe out there, and God bless you all. We love each and every one of you for all that you do to make our neighborhood better, and I hope in a small way I make your neighborhood better too. Good night all.